Hello friends, this is Ravi Navadia, and in today's video I am going to present the database of a spies organization. So let me start with some introductory questions. Here are some questions regarding the database. Uh, why do I take this project? How many databases do I use in this project? How do I manage the data? What kind of data do I need to be included? How many tables I do create for this project? How the data are related to each other? What kind of query I am gonna execute? And some so many questions. So let's start from first. Why do I take this project? I mean the topic. I'm very curious about missions, especially those missions which are done by a government for their nation. And the spy database is kind of the similar topic, as well as there is so much fun to play with the data I used in this database. For example, the name of a mission or the code of any agent, and so on. The next is how many database do I use in this project? Definitely the answer is what you all know all, MongoDB, Neo4j. But in relation database, I take Oracle because the main reason is why I pick Oracle instead of other RDB is the difference between the language, is how they handle variable and built-in functions and so on. How do I manage the data? Obviously this is the proper database, so I need to the data which seems like the equal original data. So create the data which looks like the original. I took the help of Mokru, which is the third party website, and I can create any kind of data which with the use of it. I will discuss in depth later on this video regarding the management. The next is what kind of data do I need to be included. This is the spy database, so for that I include data that are related to some string operation or like a surgical strike. The next one is how many tables do I create for this project. If I talk about the table creation, so there are a multiple type of tables for multiple entities, like for a personal or for a country and so on. I will cover this topic in depth within the presentation later on. Next is how the data are related to each other. This is a database project, and so I have to create some relationship within the data set to get a proper outcome of it. So I create a multiple relationship within the data table and the data set. Let's say an example, like a Vinod is an agent and he is working for an operation called Operation Magic Carpet in let's say in Afghanistan, and he has Sultan as his agent code. So yeah, this kind of relationship we can expect from this database. The next one is what kind of query I am gonna execute. I will perform a different kind of 10 queries which is compatible with the three databases what I already mentioned in one of the previous question. Even I will discuss this topic in depth as I cover this topic in upcoming slides. Now let's move on to the blueprint of this project. Like blueprint, I mean the ER diagram. So here you can see the ER diagram. Uh, uh, we have 6 entities for a 6 different type of data set. Let me first start from our initial data set, which is officer. We can consider officer as a person who just work for a government. So based on that, its attribute is designed. Now let dive into the attribute section. So for that officer, first thing we need in his identification as a government employee. So over here we have officer ID. The second thing is we have the name of the officer, and next is organization name. This person is working for which organization or for which country, because as I mentioned earlier that this is just a data set for the person, and the person belongs from anywhere in the world. So that's why we need the data, the name of the organization, so we can identify the person is from which country. Now let's move on the next entity, which is again a personal detail, that join date. Here the joining date is mentioned, so we can assume that this guy is working for this organization from last how many times. And the last one is his salary, and which is again a personal detail, which should be underneath the personal entity. So this is our first entity completed. So now let's move on to the second entity, which is agent. So here I divide a person into different two different entities. One is the officer, and which I just show you, and second is a agent. So the role of the agent in this database is the person who works for any secret agency like ISI and RO. But I talk about a officer, so it means that a person who just work for a government. It may work as a army officer, or maybe work as a civil servant, or in maybe in other post. So I hope you guys are clear. Okay, now let's look at agent entity. Here we have a two attribute. First one is agent identification number, through which we can get the agent detail. And the second thing is officer id, which connect this entity to the officer entity. To give officer id on an agent table, we can directly connect the officer personal detail. Okay, so now move on to the third entity, which is operations. This is a bit sensitive data for the nation, because it contains so many things which should not be exposed. Let's dive into the attribute without wasting the time. So here are some first attribute you can see is the name of the particular operations. Next is agent id, which already we see in the agent table, and to include it here, we can connect both entities. Following attribute starting date of the operation, and next is the ending date of the operation. To include it this kind of dates, we know that when the mission was executed, and how much time it takes to complete. And the next thing is operating country. It simply means for which country this mission is, or in other word, the enemy country. And the last one is the status of this mission, like what happened with the mission. Is it successfully done, or the country failed to execute the mission, and so on. And the next thing is the organization. In this entity, we can find the detail about the organization. Simply this contain two different type of attributes. First is the organization name, like raw and ISI, and the second is the country that operate the organization. Furthermore is the branch entity, who simply store the detail about the branches of any organization. So the branch entity has a four attribute. First one is the branch code, as you can see in the diagram, when the branch name comes. Next is the address of the branch, and last one which is contains the organization name, and this attribute connect this data set to the organization. Now move on to the last entity, which is a skill. Obviously there is some sort of skills a person has, and if we are looking at the agent who is working for the country, uh, the really need the extraordinary skills. So for that I create an extra entity especially for the skill. So this is an entity contains two things. First is an officer id, through which we can figure out who has the skill, and the next one is the skill itself. So this is all about a ER diagram and entities we are planning for the project. Now let's look into the table, node, and the collection we have here for different data sets. Let me first give a brief idea of how I am gonna execute all data set. First, I create a table, or you can say a collection, as per the mention in ER diagram. So here are some samples to get some idea like what kind of management I apply in a project. So as you can see here, the table, the officer table. I have five different field. First one is officer ID, then officer name, organization name, join date, salary. So here I create officer ID as a primary key and organization name as a foreign key. Now let's move on to the agent table. Here we have two fields where the agent ID is the primary key and the officer ID as a foreign key. Next is operation. In this table we have a six field: operation name, agent ID, starting date, ending date, operating country, and the status. Here the agent ID is gonna be the foreign key. Another one is organization, in which we have organization name and the country. Next is a branch, and in this table we have a four field: branch code, branch name, branch address, and the last one is organization name, where the branch code is the primary key and organization name is the foreign key. And the last one is a skill table, which is very simple, where we have just two field. One is officer ID and the second one is itself the skill, where the officer ID is a foreign key. So this is all about the table and the relationship. Now let's look into the queries what I'm gonna execute in my project. Here are some 10 queries. First is find all the agent having the skill of running and playing baseball. On this query I am gonna to get the detail on all those agents based on the officer table, and then find the skills on it. Other is to find the name of those officer who are posting as an agent of ISI and who operations are successfully completed. For this execution, first I found those agents detail how are works who are works for ISI, and the and again filter the data to get the operation which are successfully. Find the next find the one agent who has the highest salary and who also works for the United States. Here my initial stage is to find those person who are working for United States, and then find find the one guy who has the maximum salary. The next one is the get the name of spy mission completed before January 1st 2021. This query is sounds bit easier, where I have to just filter my database based on the based on the date, and then just get those date where the ending date of the mission is less than 1st January 21. Display the name of a branch where which are work for Pakistan and located in United States. So on this type of query, I did find all the branches which are working for Pakistan, and then filter those data and find those branches name which are just in United States. Now show the spy. The next is show the spy agents detail who participant in some in more than 5 mission and complete before January 1st 2021. This query is sound simple, but while I executing the query, it felt that it's really complicated, where the first I have to found those agents detail who are complete more than 5 missions, and then check all those missions date which should be completed before January 1st 2021. The next query is get the spy organization name whose branches are in India and United States. On this query, I have to find the organization name whose branches are in United States and India by just using the branch table. The next query is find the officer ID and officer name whose all operations are completed successfully. On this query, first I have to make a data set where I have those agents ID who all operations are completed successfully, and then with the use of those agents ID, get officer ID from the agent table, and this is the link where I can get the officer name from the officer table. Get those officer detail who are working in a mission hashtag 20D, and also have a skill of a swimming. On this query, I am gonna find an agent who works in a Aztec 20D mission, and then based on their agent ID, I get the officer ID, and based on the officer ID, I can filter the skill data and get a result. The last query is display the first mission detail of each spy organization. Here I have to first find those missions which are done by every spy organization and filter those data and find the earliest date of all of those. So yeah, this is all about my project, and I hope you all are clear about it, and thank you for listening me, and have a great wonderful day. Thank you again.